Why does your heart rate spike the moment your phone starts ringing, even when you know exactly who's calling? Here's what you need to understand right now. This isn't about being rude. It's not about being lazy or antisocial. What you're experiencing is a legitimate psychological response to what your brain perceives as an ambush. That feeling of dread when you see an incoming call, that's not a character flaw. That's your nervous system detecting a threat to your autonomy, your mental space, and your sense of control. And today, we're going to investigate exactly why phone calls trigger this response in certain people while others answer without a second thought. We're going to uncover 3 specific psychological mechanisms that explain phone anxiety, why this behavior is increasing in modern society, and what it reveals about how your mind protects itself from invisible violations. By the end, you'll understand that avoiding phone calls isn't something you need to fix. It's something you need to honor with better boundaries. Let's start with the first clue, the intrusion factor. When someone calls you, what's actually happening from a neurological perspective? Your brain registers the phone ring as an unscheduled demand for immediate attention. Think about it. You didn't agree to this conversation. You didn't prepare for it. You were in the middle of your own thoughts, your own tasks, your own reality. And suddenly, someone is demanding that you drop everything and enter their reality right now. This is why researchers have started calling phone calls synchronous communication violations. It's the digital equivalent of someone walking into your home without knocking, sitting down on your couch, and expecting you to entertain them immediately. Your brain doesn't process this as a simple request for connection. It processes it as an invasion of your cognitive territory, and invasions trigger cortisol. That stress hormone floods your system the moment the phone rings because your amygdala, your threat detection center, is essentially saying, someone is trying to control your time and attention without your consent. People who don't experience phone anxiety have a different threat threshold. Their brains don't register the intrusion as intensely. But if you're someone who values autonomy, who carefully manages your mental energy, who experiences your inner world as a sanctuary that requires protection, then a phone call feels like a violation, not because the person calling has bad intentions, but because the medium itself is invasive by design. The second piece of this puzzle is about control and performance pressure. Here's what makes phone calls uniquely anxiety-inducing compared to other forms of communication. They require real-time performance with no editing capability. When you receive a text message, you have time. Time to process what was said. Time to formulate the perfect response. Time to present the version of yourself you want to present. You can delete and rewrite. You can think before you speak. You maintain complete control over how you're perceived. But a phone call strips all of that away. Suddenly, you're expected to be articulate, engaging, emotionally appropriate, and mentally present, all in real time, with no preparation, no script, no safety net. For people with perfectionist tendencies, this is terrifying. Picture this exact scenario. It's 2:47 p.m. on a Wednesday. You're wearing sweatpants, sitting at your desk with half-finished work in front of you. Your phone lights up with a call from a colleague. In that split second, your brain runs a calculation. If I answer, I need to sound professional. I need to be coherent. I need to remember context from previous conversations. I need to match their energy level. I need to not say anything stupid. I need to perform the role of competent professional me right now, without preparation. And in that same split second, the weight of that performance feels impossible. So you don't answer. You let it go to voicemail. Not because you're avoiding the person, but because you're avoiding the demand for unscripted performance. The phone call requires you to be on immediately, and some days, most days, you don't have the energy to be on without warning. The third mechanism is about attention residue and task switching cost. When you're focused on something, whether it's work, a thought, a feeling, or even just existing peacefully in your own mind, your brain is in a specific state. Neuroscientists call this task engagement. When a phone call interrupts that state, your brain doesn't just pause what it was doing, it has to completely switch modes. It has to shift from internal processing to external interaction, from asynchronous time to synchronous time, from your agenda to someone else's agenda. And here's the critical part. This switching isn't instant or effortless. Research shows that it takes an average of 23 minutes to fully return to your previous level of focus after an interruption. 23 minutes. So when someone calls you for a 5-minute conversation, they're not actually taking 5 minutes of your time. They're taking 5 minutes plus the 23 minutes of recovery time your brain needs to get back to where it was. If you're someone who's highly aware of this cost, if you can feel the disruption that interruptions cause to your mental flow, then phone calls become exponentially more expensive. You're not just avoiding a conversation. You're avoiding the cognitive tax that comes with being yanked out of your current state and forced into a different one. Now let's investigate where this sensitivity comes from. Because phone anxiety isn't randomly distributed across the population. It clusters in specific psychological profiles, and understanding why reveals something important about how your mind was shaped. People who avoid phone calls often grew up in environments where they had very little control over their time, space, or attention. Maybe you had parents who demanded immediate responses to their needs. Maybe your emotional availability was treated as a given rather than a choice. Maybe you learned early that saying "not right now" was met with guilt, anger, or punishment. So you developed a hypersensitivity to demands on your attention. You learned that once someone has access to you, they can take whatever they want. Your time, your energy, your emotional labor, and you have no right to say no. The phone call then becomes a symbol of that dynamic. It's someone asserting their right to your immediate presence, and your avoidance is actually a reclamation of the boundary you weren't allowed to have as a child. There's also an evolutionary mismatch happening here that most people miss. Human beings evolved to communicate face-to-face, where we could read body language, facial expressions, environmental context. We could see if someone was busy, tired, or unavailable before we approached them. Phone calls remove all of that context. The caller has no idea if you're in the middle of something important, if you're emotionally depleted, if you're in physical pain, if you're having a bad day. They can't see you, so they can't modulate their demand based on your actual state. This creates a fundamental asymmetry. They're making a request without information. You're being asked to fulfill that request without the ability to signal your true capacity. For people who are highly attuned to fairness and reciprocity, this asymmetry feels wrong. It feels like you're being put in a position where you either violate your own needs by answering, or violate social expectations by not answering. There's no good option, so you freeze, and the anxiety builds. Here's something that people who experience phone anxiety often share: an above-average awareness of other people's expectations and emotional needs. You're not oblivious to the fact that someone wants to talk to you. You're hyper-aware of it. You can feel the weight of their expectation through the screen. You can imagine their disappointment or frustration when you don't answer. And that awareness creates a secondary layer of anxiety. Not just about the call itself, but about the guilt of avoiding it. This is high-level emotional intelligence combined with a nervous system that's already operating near capacity. You're not failing at communication. You're succeeding at self-preservation while simultaneously carrying the emotional burden of knowing that your self-preservation might hurt someone else. That's not weakness. That's actually an exhausting form of conscientiousness. So what do you do with this understanding? First, stop treating phone anxiety as a problem to be fixed through exposure therapy or forced habit change. The solution isn't to just start answering. The solution is to redesign your communication boundaries in a way that honors how your nervous system actually functions. Start by establishing explicit communication preferences with the people in your life. Tell them, "I don't do unscheduled phone calls. If you need to talk to me, send a text first and we'll schedule a time." This isn't rude. This is clear. It removes the ambush factor and gives you back control over when you engage in synchronous communication. Most people will understand. And the ones who don't, who insist that you should be available whenever they decide to call, are revealing something about their own relationship with boundaries that has nothing to do with you. Second, differentiate between anxiety that's protective and anxiety that's disproportionate. Sometimes avoiding a phone call is your intuition telling you that you don't have the capacity for that interaction right now. And that's valid information. But sometimes it's anticipatory anxiety that's based on worst-case scenarios that rarely actually happen. The way to tell the difference: ask yourself, if I knew this call would be brief, positive, and end on my terms, would I still avoid it? If yes, it's protective. Honor it. If no, it's anticipatory. Challenge it gently by answering one low-stakes call and noticing that you survived. Third, give yourself permission to end phone calls on your own timeline. One of the reasons calls feel so threatening is because we've been socialized to believe that once a call starts, we're trapped until the other person is satisfied. That's not true. You can say, "I only have 5 minutes right now," at the beginning of a call. You can say, "I need to go," in the middle of a call. You can even hang up if someone becomes aggressive or disrespectful. The call is not a binding contract. It's a voluntary exchange, and you're allowed to withdraw your participation at any time. What if the people who avoid phone calls aren't the ones who need to change? What if a society that expects constant, immediate availability is what needs to evolve? Maybe your phone anxiety isn't a disorder. Maybe it's your nervous system correctly identifying that the way we've structured modern communication violates basic human needs for autonomy, preparation, and consent. And maybe the real question isn't how do I force myself to answer, but rather, how do I build a life where I'm not constantly bracing for invasion? Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.